Today we're talking about levels of protein structure. Now, if you remember from the last lesson, we were talking about proteins, and we said a protein is a long string of amino acids. So if we do this simply here, oops, let me use a larger pen. We have AA amino acids, and they bind to each other, and we know they bind to each other like this in a long string, and sometimes there's hundreds or even thousands. Oop, this should be AA. Sometimes there's hundreds or even thousands of amino acids that bind to each other in a long chain like this, and then they kind of fold up into a certain shape, and then that makes our protein. And if you remember this whole thing, the long chain of amino acids, it's called a polypeptide. And every bond, the bonds between the amino acid molecules, between the individual amino acid molecules, are called peptide bonds. So now today we're focusing on the structure and the organization of proteins, kind of. So the structure of protein, there's 4 levels of organization, and that's how we describe how proteins are organized. I'm just going to write out the 4 levels of structure of proteins first, and then we'll talk about them in more detail. So we have the first level, which is called the primary level of organization, or the primary structure. We have the secondary level, which is called secondary. Secondary structure of proteins. The third level, which is the tertiary structure of proteins, and then the fourth level, which is the quaternary structure of proteins. So when we talk about the primary structure of proteins, we're just talking about what amino acids are in what order in a long chain like this. So the primary structure of a protein is just what amino acid, the order of the amino acids. Because if you remember, there's 20 different kinds of amino acids, and so it would just be the order that those amino acids are in. So we could have like glycine, and then maybe valine, and then leucine, and then histidine, and maybe glutamate. And like I said, you don't need to know these names or anything like that. These are just some abbreviations for some of the 20 different amino acids. And so this would be the primary structure. We'd say, oh, the primary structure of this protein is this order of amino acids: glycine, valine, leucine, histidine, and glutamate. And then if I switched one of these, like if I switched these two, and then maybe I switch these two or something, then it would be a different primary structure because there would be a different order of amino acids. So that's the primary structure. Secondary structure, there's 2 secondary structures you need to know. One of them is, I'm going to draw it like this, an alpha helix, and then the other one is, oops, that's not a good way to draw that actually, is the beta pleated sheets. So this would be the alpha helix, which makes sense, right? It looks like a helix, an alpha helix, the shape, the protein. This primary structure, the long chain of amino acids, kind of moves and folds itself into a shape that looks like an alpha helix. So you can imagine this here is just a long chain of amino acids that has kind of folded and shaped itself to look like a helix. It's called an alpha helix. This is called beta pleated sheets, or sometimes just beta sheets, and we can see that. And this would just be a chain, a polypeptide that has folded itself to look like this, called the beta pleated sheet. So those are the only two secondary shapes that you need to know, is that proteins either fold themselves into alpha helices or beta pleated sheets. Third, we have the tertiary structure of a protein, and this is just how the whole protein folds itself together to make its unique shape. And so this would be if we have a chain, our polypeptide, our chain of amino acids, however it is that it folds together to make its overall shape would be the tertiary structure. So, and this would be the whole polypeptide chain right here. This is how the whole polypeptide chain forms. Now these are just alpha helix and beta pleated sheets are just small sections of the polypeptide. So within this here, maybe this section here, you can't see the shape, but maybe that would be in an alpha helix, and maybe this section here would be in a beta pleated sheet, and then maybe over here again we have an alpha helix, and here maybe is another alpha helix, and here's a beta pleated sheet. So these are just small sections of the polypeptide, and then the whole polypeptide forms into this shape, and then alpha helices and beta pleated sheets are part of that polypeptide that folds into its completed shape. And the fourth level of organization, the quaternary structure, this is how more than one polypeptide chains bond together and interact. Now we know all proteins have at least one polypeptide chain. However, some proteins have more than one. So if there's only one polypeptide chain in a protein, there is no quaternary structure because there's only one polypeptide chain. It can't interact with another one. If there's more than one polypeptide chain, however, they have to bond together and they interact, and that's called the quaternary structure. So let's say we have a protein that has 3 polypeptide chains. So there's our first one. And now maybe here's our next polypeptide chain. It's going like this. And now we have a third polypeptide chain, and that one maybe bonds with these two along the bottom here. So the quaternary structure is how these 3 individual polypeptide chains interact and bond in the shape that they all make together. So that's the quaternary structure. Remember, primary is just the sequence of the individual amino acids. Secondary structure is equal alpha helix or beta pleated sheets, and these are just small sections of the polypeptide chain. The tertiary structure is how the entire polypeptide chain folds, how it makes its shape, the shape that it folds itself into. And alpha helices and beta pleated sheets are small sections of the entire polypeptide chain, so they're still in there. And then quaternary structure is how more than one polypeptide chain come together to complete the protein. And now one other big thing to remember about proteins, and that you'll hear this all the time, is that shape determines function. Shape determines function when it comes to proteins. And that just means the protein's shape, how it folds like this, what shape it's in, determines the function that it has in your body. So you can think about this. If your protein does not fold correctly, it makes a shape it's not supposed to, then it's not going to do the job that it's supposed to do. That's why protein folding and learning about all these structures is so important, because if a protein doesn't make the right shape, then it cannot do the job that it's supposed to do.